She was the it girl before influencers were a thing, setting trends, breaking hearts, and defying every rule in the book. And then, Hollywood shut the door on her. A Star is Born. Brooklyn, New York, 1905. Life didn't start with a silver spoon for Clara Bow. She was born into poverty, surrounded by hardship, with a mother struggling severely with mental health issues and a father who was rarely there. It wasn't just that Clara had a rough childhood. Her world was tough from every angle. Friends were scarce, stability was non-existent, and money was always tight. By the time she was a young teen, Clara knew she wanted out of Brooklyn's harsh realities. But how? Her one escape? The movies. Clara wasn't like other kids who watched movies just for fun. She watched with an intensity, a hunger, almost like she was taking notes. Hollywood stars like Mary Pickford and Charlie Chaplin weren't just celebrities to Clara, they were the gatekeepers to a life she desperately wanted. Yet Hollywood might as well have been a world away. For a poor girl from Brooklyn, breaking into film felt about as realistic as winning the lottery. But Clara wasn't one to be stopped by reality. By 1921, at just 16, she decided to take her first big chance. Motion Picture Magazine was running a nationwide contest, promising the winner a shot at acting in a real movie. Thousands of girls entered, hopeful, ambitious, from all over the country, but only one would win. And, somehow, against all odds, Clara did. That was her first break, the ticket she'd dreamed of. But as Clara quickly learned, getting a shot in Hollywood didn't mean you'd get a free ride. The film industry was brutal, especially to newcomers, and even more to those who didn't come from privilege. Clara, with her thick Brooklyn accent, unpolished manners, and street-smart attitude, didn't fit the Hollywood mold. Directors mocked her. Other actresses looked down on her. She was an outsider, a poor, untrained girl with a Brooklyn accent. But Clara was relentless. She worked small parts, taking any role she could, learning fast and always showing up ready to prove herself. In her mind, Hollywood wasn't going to chew her up and spit her out. She wasn't going to be a one-hit wonder. No, Clara was here to stay. Her big break wasn't far off. Hollywood hadn't seen anything quite like Clara Bow, and soon enough, the world would know her name. Breaking into silent films. Clara Bow's first real film role came in Beyond the Rainbow in 1922. The movie itself wasn't a hit, but Clara? She was unforgettable. She had something most actresses didn't: raw, magnetic energy. Clara didn't need to say a word. She could pull audiences in just by looking at the camera. Hollywood wasn't used to that level of intensity. In an era where actors had only their faces and body language to communicate, Clara stood out. Her expressions were real, unfiltered. She made you feel things. Directors took notice. Then came Grit in 1923. Clara's role was small, but she brought a spark to it that no one could ignore. But it was Down to the Sea in Ships that really launched her. The film was a low-budget project, but Clara's performance made it unforgettable. Critics couldn't stop talking about her. They called her fresh, exciting, a breath of new life in Hollywood. At just 18, Clara was quickly becoming one of the most talked-about young actresses. By 1924, she was appearing in film after film. The Daring Years, The Primrose Path, Poisoned Paradise, each one took her closer to stardom. Hollywood had plenty of beautiful actresses, but Clara was something different. She wasn't trying to be the glamorous, distant star. She was relatable, even a bit rough around the edges, and that's exactly what people loved about her. By 1925, Clara had appeared in nearly 20 films. She was unstoppable. People started calling her the Brooklyn Bonfire because she brought such fiery energy to the screen. She didn't fit the Hollywood mold, but that only made her more popular. Clara didn't have the polished, perfect image that studios loved. She was real, and audiences loved her for it. Hollywood studios noticed her rising popularity and started offering her more roles, often in films where she could play strong, energetic characters. Clara was becoming a new kind of star, one who didn't look like royalty but like someone you might actually know. She had that girl-next-door appeal that Hollywood hadn't fully tapped into yet. The it girl phenomenon. In 1927, Clara Bow's life changed forever. She starred in It, a romantic comedy that wasn't just a hit, it redefined her career and cemented her as Hollywood's girl next door. But it wasn't just any movie, it became a cultural sensation and Clara became a symbol. The film's success turned her into the original It Girl. The term It Girl wasn't just Hollywood slang, it meant Clara embodied everything exciting about the era. The Roaring Twenties was a time of change. The flapper lifestyle, young, bold, and free, was everywhere, and Clara fit the image perfectly. She wasn't just a movie star, she was a trendsetter. Women admired her fearless style, her playful attitude, and her independence. She represented a new type of woman who wasn't afraid to break rules. In It, Clara played Betty Lou Spence, a department store worker with big dreams and a personality to match. Betty Lou was lively, ambitious, and a bit rebellious. Clara's portrayal hit home with audiences because she wasn't playing some unreachable, glamorous character. She was relatable and real, funny and full of life. Clara wasn't acting like a movie star, she was acting like herself. Audiences couldn't get enough. She was in magazines, on posters, and in every gossip column. The press loved her, calling her Hollywood's It Girl on and off the screen. She was everywhere, an icon of the era. Women wanted her style and her confidence. Men were drawn to her charm and beauty. Clara Bow wasn't just a movie star, she was Hollywood's new obsession. But with fame came pressure. By the end of 1927, Clara was Hollywood's biggest draw and the demand for her only grew. She had set the standard, and everyone wanted a piece of her. Hollywood wasn't known for protecting its stars, and the attention came with high expectations. Clara was expected to keep up her It Girl image, but behind the scenes, the weight of fame was starting to show. The world loved her now, but fame in Hollywood was fickle. The pressure of being a cultural icon was heavy, and Clara was beginning to feel it. She was at the top, but in Hollywood, that also meant you had a long way to go. Behind the scenes, personal struggles. While Clara Bow's career was skyrocketing, her personal life was a storm barely held together. Fame, money, and Hollywood's glitz couldn't erase the painful past she carried. Family issues that had haunted her since childhood followed her to Hollywood. Her father moved to Los Angeles to be closer to her, but their relationship was rocky, filled with tension and old wounds. Then there was her mother, a different story entirely. Clara's mother suffered from severe mental illness, a reality that Clara had struggled with since she was young. One night, that reality turned into a nightmare Clara could never forget. Her mother, deep in the grip of mental illness, reportedly attempted to kill her. Clara barely escaped, physically unharmed but mentally shaken. She carried the trauma with her, even as Hollywood celebrated her as its newest shining star. To the world, Clara was the ultimate It Girl, the happy, carefree flapper. But behind closed doors, she was haunted. By memories, by family struggles, by the weight of everything she'd experienced. Despite her rising fame, Clara was quietly battling depression and anxiety. The unrelenting demands of Hollywood only made things worse. Studios wanted her to work non-stop, pushing her from one role to the next without any real breaks. Every film, every publicity event, every interview drained her energy. Hollywood didn't make room for personal struggles. The industry wanted Clara at her best, always on, always glamorous, with no room for cracks in her image. But behind the lively, energetic persona she brought to the screen, Clara was fighting to keep herself together. Fame, which she'd once seen as an escape from her past, had become its own prison. Instead of freedom, it added to her pain, chaining her to relentless expectations and the brutal pace of Hollywood life. And yet, she kept going. She showed up on set, smiled for the cameras, and kept the world convinced she was living the dream. But the cracks were there, growing with each new demand, each forced smile, the strain of stardom. At the height of her career, Clara Bow was Hollywood's most bankable star. She was their golden ticket, bringing audiences to theaters by the thousands. But success came at a relentless pace. Clara was working non-stop, moving from one film set to the next without a break. Rest wasn't part of the studio's plan. If she was making money, she was working. Simple as that. Studios treated Clara as an asset, not a person. They kept her schedule packed, pushing her to her limits. Clara's personal life soon started to mirror the wild, impulsive roles she played on screen. Stories circulated about her partying, her reckless spending, and her turbulent relationships. The press latched onto every bit of gossip, feeding the public an image of Clara as a carefree, rebellious star, but the headlines didn't tell the real story. Behind the scenes, Clara was exhausted. She was working around the clock with no time to catch her breath. The non-stop demands took a toll. Clara's health began to suffer. Physically, mentally, she was worn down. She struggled with exhaustion and the mental strain of constant work. But Hollywood wasn't interested in her well-being. They only wanted the perfect image. Clara was expected to look flawless, act cheerful, and maintain that magnetic it-girl charm. Studios didn't care if she was breaking down inside. They only cared about her performance on screen. Taking a break wasn't an option. Clara was too famous, too profitable. She was trapped in a cycle where every day was a new show, a new demand. The world was watching, and she couldn't afford to let them see her struggle. Clara's life had become a spectacle, a constant show put on for Hollywood and the fans. The pressure was intense, and there was no escape. The price of fame weighed heavily on Clara. Every day she paid it, putting on a brave face for the cameras, keeping the act going. Hollywood had created a star, but in doing so, they'd pushed her to the edge. Clara Bow was living the dream, but the cost was more than anyone knew: the transition to talkies. The late 1920s brought a seismic shift in Hollywood. Silent films were fading, and talkies were taking their place. For many stars, adapting to sound films was a challenge, but for Clara Bow, it was a turning point. Clara's career had thrived on the big, expressive style required in silent films, but talkies introduced new hurdles. Her natural Brooklyn accent was rough, unrefined, and didn't match Hollywood's polished image of what a leading lady should sound like. The industry quickly picked up on it, and so did the press. Gossip columns were ruthless, labeling her voice as too common for the new Hollywood. Reporters criticized her accent, her speaking style, and questioned if she could survive in this new era of film. Rumors circulated that Clara's career would soon be washed up, and the pressure mounted for her to change. Studio executives suggested speech training to smooth out her accent, but Clara resisted. She had built her career on being authentic and didn't want to change who she was just to fit a new mold. Despite the criticism, Clara was determined to make it work. She took on roles in early sound films like The Wild Party, 1929, and Dangerous Curves, 1929. These films did decently at the box office, but the transition wasn't smooth. Working with sound was technically demanding and mentally draining. Silent films allowed Clara to rely on her facial expressions and body language, but talkies required controlled vocal delivery, something that didn't come naturally to her. The entire process felt restrictive, and her frustration began to show. Clara, known for her spontaneous charm, felt stifled by the rigid structure of sound film production. The press wasn't forgiving. Articles painted her as outdated, mocking her voice and suggesting she couldn't keep up with Hollywood's new demands. Clara felt trapped, torn between the industry's expectations and her own identity. The criticism was relentless, and each new film felt like a battle to prove herself. The golden age of her silent film career, filled with excitement and success, had ended. Now, she found herself struggling to keep up in Hollywood's rapidly changing landscape, unsure if there was still a place for her in this new world of sound, media scandals, and public scrutiny. Hollywood loved Clara's fame, but the media loved her scandals even more. Clara was under a microscope, with tabloids eagerly awaiting any sign of trouble. Her personal life became front-page material. Every relationship, every party, every late night became a headline. The press called her a wild child, exaggerating stories about her social life and painting her as reckless. In 1930, Clara found herself in one of Hollywood's biggest scandals. A former secretary, Daisy DeVoe, accused her of numerous misdeeds, from financial misconduct to lavish spending. DeVoe had worked closely with Clara, handling her finances and personal matters, but things took a sharp turn when DeVoe allegedly embezzled from her. When Clara fired her, Daisy retaliated by airing her personal affairs to the public. The case went to trial, and Hollywood's It Girl was dragged through the mud. The courtroom became a media circus, with every detail about Clara's spending, her relationships, and even her mental health up for debate. The public was hooked on the drama. Clara tried to stay composed, but the constant scrutiny was breaking her down. She felt betrayed, isolated, and exhausted. The press was relentless. They painted Clara as irresponsible, even unstable, playing up every accusation against her. Hollywood's biggest star was now a tabloid favorite for all the wrong reasons. Clara won the case, but the damage was done. The public saw her differently, and she felt the weight of judgment everywhere she went. This scandal left her reputation bruised and her trust shattered. Hollywood's It Girl was now also its favorite subject of scandal: financial and legal troubles. The Daisy DeVoe scandal may have ended, but Clara Bow's financial troubles were just beginning. Money had never been a comfortable subject for her. Growing up in poverty, she had little experience with managing finances. Hollywood paid her well, but her rapid rise to fame had brought equally rapid expenses. Clara loved to spend, often on impulsive purchases, and didn't have much understanding of long-term financial planning. Worse, she trusted the wrong people to manage her money. After the DeVoe trial, Clara took a closer look at her finances, and it wasn't pretty. She realized her expenses were through the roof, and taxes were another issue altogether. In her rush to make a name for herself, she hadn't kept up with the complex tax requirements that came with a high Hollywood income. Now, unpaid taxes were piling up, creating a new set of legal troubles. Clara, who had once been one of the highest-paid actresses in Hollywood, now found herself buried under bills and legal fees. The studios didn't offer much help. To them, Clara was only as valuable as her latest film. Outside the set, her problems were her own. Hollywood's golden age was great at producing stars, but it didn't care much for supporting them. Clara was on her own, left to navigate financial problems she didn't fully understand. Desperate to make ends meet, she tried to adapt. She took on more roles, hoping the extra income would help balance things out. She attended public events, even making appearances she wasn't thrilled about just to keep money coming in. But the expenses never seemed to end, and the unpaid taxes kept growing. It was a losing battle, and Clara could feel the pressure mounting with each passing month. The financial troubles added to her stress. Already exhausted from the strain of nonstop work, Clara was now weighed down by constant legal threats and growing debt. She felt overwhelmed, mentally and physically, leaving Hollywood behind. By the early 1930s, Clara Bow was reaching her breaking point. Years of nonstop work, financial pressure, and public scrutiny had taken their toll. Fame, which once felt like her escape, had become a prison. Exhausted and needing a way out, Clara made a bold decision. It was time to leave Hollywood. In 1931, she married actor and rancher Rex Bell. Together, they decided to move to a remote ranch in Nevada, miles away from Los Angeles and its relentless demands. For Clara, this move was a chance to reclaim her life. Hollywood had made her a star, but it had also drained her. Now, she wanted peace and privacy, a chance to build something real. Her departure shocked the public and the film industry. Clara Bow was the ultimate it girl, and fans had never expected her to just walk away. Some wondered if she'd return, but Clara was firm. She'd made her choice, and she was ready to leave it all behind. Life on the ranch was an adjustment. The quiet of Nevada felt worlds apart from Hollywood's bustling pace. After years of constant work and attention, the calm almost felt unsettling. But Rex offered the stability and support she needed. For the first time, she could focus on personal happiness over public approval. With Rex by her side, Clara found herself ready to fully step out of Hollywood's shadow. She was building a life far removed from the glamour, a life where she could finally just be Clara. Hollywood was in the past, and she was determined to keep it that way. Life in Nevada. Life on the ranch was a different kind of rhythm. The Hollywood star was gone, replaced by someone simpler, more grounded. Clara swapped film scripts for ranch chores, the glitz of premieres for wide-open spaces. Her days filled up with feeding animals, fixing fences, and spending quiet evenings with Rex. She traded glamour for simplicity, and she loved it. In time, Clara settled fully into her new role. She wasn't just a former actress, she was a wife, a partner, and soon a mother. She and Rex had 2 sons, Tony and George. For Clara, this life was everything she'd never found in Hollywood. She wasn't a star here, she was just mom. It was the first time her life wasn't about headlines or the next big role. It was about family, and that was enough. But Clara's battles weren't entirely over. Like her mother, she struggled with mental health, eventually being diagnosed with schizophrenia. The dark moments returned, and she faced them quietly. There were even moments when she tried to escape the pain. In 1949, she underwent shock therapy to try to find relief. Through it all, she stayed close to her family, who became her anchor. Fans hadn't forgotten Clara. Occasionally, letters would arrive, or newspapers would run nostalgic pieces on Hollywood's It Girl. But she was done with that life. She was content on the ranch, far from the public eye. Hollywood felt like a distant memory, one she was happy to leave behind. In Nevada, Clara Bow found the peace she'd been searching for. Fame and glamour no longer mattered. Here, she was free from the demands, the pressures, the relentless image. She was just herself. And in the quiet of Nevada, that was finally enough.